Ukraine says more than 800 drones were launched, as well as 4 ballistic missiles and 9 cruise missiles.
What does the rise of the drones, that could be our next movie, what are the ramifications for international stability?
Just in the last 48 hours, you've seen the Russians be able to hit Ukrainian targets, government buildings, with drones. We've seen the Ukrainians attacking deeper into Russia, $300 drones taking out $100+ million jet fighters. A real worry for countries outside of Russia and Ukraine. I worry about a whole bunch of smaller countries with really advanced military capabilities, non-state actors, terrorist actors. How do you defend? I mean, Trump was just at the US Open. How do you defend a big stadium against a swarm of drone strikes? This is an increasingly open and real question that I fear we're going to learn the answer to real time.
Maybe the only guy in the history of international politics and economics that's just universally beloved. Ian Bremmer, he's here today, internationally beloved, respected, founder and president of Eurasia Group, founder and president of G0, teaches at Columbia, used to teach at NYU. He's got 11 books, New York Times bestsellers, Us Versus Them, The Power of Crisis. Just an all-around beautiful baby boy. We love him. Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod, most importantly. Absolutely.
There we go.
There you go.
I thought that since you're pressed for time and you're smarter than me, we could just treat this as a lightning round. Everybody always just wants to get us to a lightning round. And so I've summarized a lot of the questions. But the one I wanted to give a little bit of breath to was the tweet by President Trump about our help in World War II, which then you retweeted saying, thank you for your attention to this matter, which I thought was quite funny. But the end of the tweet wants them to recognize our participation in that and our blood and bravery and sacrifice. But he says, may President Xi and the wonderful people of China have a great and lasting day of celebration. Please give my warmest regards to Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un as you conspire against the United States of America. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, Shane, probably the most important thing on geopolitics that Trump has posted in a while, so I'm glad we're starting with this. Let's keep in mind that these are leaders, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, that Trump has had personal contact with in a way that Biden had not, and they haven't been successful. I mean, Trump met with Kim Jong-un a couple times. Then we just recently found out a few days ago, an extraordinary piece of investigative journalism by the New York Times, that Trump had actually ordered a SEAL team to try to land in North Korea and get a listening device, surveillance equipment that would give the U.S. information on what was happening in North Korea. Failed, ended up shooting a bunch of North Korean fishermen, got the hell out. So that relationship clearly is not going to get rebuilt anytime soon.
Who likes going to the doctor? Not me. Now, whether it's a checkup or anything else you've been avoiding, ZocDoc makes booking a doctor stupidly easy. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors, read real reviews, and book instantly. They've got 100,000 plus doctors across every specialty. I've used it and it works. So go to ZocDoc.com/Shane and find and book a top-rated doctor today, instantly. That's ZocDoc.com/Shane. That's ZocDoc.com/Shane. Football season is upon us, and this season we've teamed up with BetMGM. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we have special offers for our listeners every single week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code SHANE, that's Shaney, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Just make sure you use bonus code SHANE when you sign up. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code SHANE and get up to $1,500 first bet offer today.
Trump has said he can get, a peace deal done with Putin. He's admitted that it's a lot harder than he thought it was going to be. Just had, a meeting with Putin in Anchorage, but on the back of that, Putin is not moving towards a meeting with Zelensky. He's not moving towards a ceasefire. And all he's doing is cozying up much warmer meeting with his bestie, Xi Jinping. So, I mean, geopolitically, this isn't going so well for Trump. And of course, Xi himself is the one major leader that Trump had to seriously back down in his engagements with. He put these big tariffs on and expected Xi Jinping was going to, beg for mercy and ask for a meeting. And Xi did neither of those things. Instead, not only did he reciprocate with tariffs, but he actually put licensing requirements on critical minerals that was going to force U.S. companies to shut down. And Trump is the one that blinked. Trump is the one that had to back down, had to take off tariffs, and had to even offer to remove the export controls on U.S. semiconductors. One of the few things that had bipartisan support from the Democrats and Republicans, from Biden and, at least heretofore, the Trump administration. So these three leaders meeting together to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the victory in World War II, which Trump rightly says the United States was actually the critical actor for. What the hell, right? I mean, how's that going? That I understand that Trump is posting it as if it's no big deal. Trump is posting as if, okay, you guys have fun and conspire because, you're not as important as I am. The fact is, Trump is pretty PO'd about the fact that you've got three things that Trump has tried to accomplish here, right? Peace on Ukraine. He's the great peacemaker. Breakout deal with Kim Jong-un. He should get the Nobel for that. And forcing the Chinese to the table on trade. Those are, frankly, perhaps his three biggest heretofore missed opportunities, even call them failures. So yeah, he's not happy about these three gentlemen, authoritarian dictators meeting together. He's not happy about that one bit.
With the Iranians or Iranians lurking around in the background, sort of on the periphery of all the pictures.
Trump has a better record on Iran because he was able to whack them hard, as was Israel, push back their nuclear program. No ability of Iran to respond to the U.S. And you didn't ask me yet about Modi. I'm sure you will. But I mean, Modi, there's a bit of an own goal from both Trump and Modi that has certainly taken the blush off of that friendship. But Modi doesn't have a flip to China that is available to him for lots of reasons we can talk about, in a way that Putin, Kim Jong-un, Pezeshkian from Iran all do.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Modi in that first term, best friends, lots of similarities drawn between the two guys, populists, within their own countries. Now they've moved to frenemies, if not enemies. And I believe there were like 50% tariffs put on. Yeah. And Trump was very upset because there was a conflict between, my opinion, the most dangerous border in the world, the line of control between India and Pakistan.
Two major nuclear powers, absolutely, yeah.
Who have both professed that they would have no problem lighting the other guys up. Trump did help, sent his Rubio and Vance, and they did do some work. Pakistan said yes, thank you for your help. India was conspicuously silent, and that really got Trump's Irish up. Maybe explain a bit of what happened there.
Trump did help. First of all, let's recognize, since we started off this conversation with places where Trump has failed, in the case of India, Pakistan, Trump really he recognizes the danger. He's very concerned about nuclear weapons. He talks about it more than most presidents, frankly. And when he saw that fight, he wanted to do what was possible to help with a ceasefire in a way that, the Europeans didn't, right? The Chinese didn't, the Russians did, the United States did.
One Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons.
He has some influence with Pakistan. There's a lot of business going on in the crypto field between Trump's family and the Pakistani government. which has facilitated that. And it wasn't just that Modi was conspicuously silent. Modi publicly said that Trump had nothing to do with it, did not facilitate, and really embarrassed Trump. Now, to be clear, there had been a discussion between the United States and India that they were going to both announce the ceasefire together. The foreign secretary, Jaishankar, who's very, very bright, was actually drafting the statement when Trump decided to front run it and announce it himself, which incensed the Indian prime minister. And Modi has a very strong sense of ego. And so he decided that, no, he wasn't going to just be quiet. He was going to publicly say, no, you didn't actually do that. He was going to hit back. And, you know, what we've seen from many leaders around the world is that hitting back against Trump when you're not in a strong position is not necessarily a great idea. If Xi Jinping hits back, he can get away with it. Modi hits back, right? Or let's say Claudia Sheinbaum hits back, or, you know, the Danish prime minister hits back. That's not going to go so well. And so Trump got angry. Trump also has developed a much closer relationship with Pakistan, and specifically with the Army Chief of Staff Munir, which is, of course, the principal enemy, not adversary, enemy of India. India really doesn't like that. And so Modi's been very, very cautious about engaging, even getting on the phone. And also Modi had heard from many other countries, particularly the Vietnamese. I got a readout on that, that what the Vietnamese leadership agreed to on trade with Trump was not what Trump then announced. Trump announced something different. And Modi absolutely was not prepared to have a back channel with Trump and then have Trump say something that was different from what Modi was himself going to prepare and present to Parliament. So for those reasons, Modi wasn't even willing to have a phone call with Trump. So yeah, this relationship has definitely deteriorated. The U.S. now has 50% tariffs on India. There's not that much trade between the two countries. So we're talking about 0.5% of GDP growth that's going to come off of India. But Modi's prepared to take that hit. And for now, this is probably one of the sharpest deteriorating relationships compared to, as you said, Shane, what had been a very warm friendship, not only in Trump's first term, but even at the beginning of this second Trump administration.
So we go from the G7 to the, I believe you or someone in your company coined this term, the Xi3.
I call it the Xi3. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is fantastic.
And here we're talking about, again, the Xi3 is North Korea, Russia, and China. And there's no question who the leader of that group is. It's like two dwarves and Xi, so call it the Xi3. It kind of plays. And
keeping in that milieu, we have the Global Governance Initiative, the GGI, that was unveiled in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
By Xi Jinping, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is quite interesting because as America is sort of retreating from international institutions, China is sort of filling that vacuum. And this is one of the sort of chess pieces. Maybe you can unpack that a little bit.
Well, this global governance initiative is not new. Xi Jinping has been talking about moving in that direction for about 4 years now. He clearly sees an opportunity not to replace the United States, not to be the leader that the United States is. China has nowhere near that capability militarily, diplomatically, or even economically. They've got, also massive capital controls, right? And serious debt problems. And they certainly don't have the global reserve currency and not a real capacity to get there in the foreseeable future. So it's not a replacement of the United States. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is not that. It's not a collective security agreement. It's not NATO equivalent. It's not any of those things. But what Xi Jinping does have is an understanding that if the United States is going to become not only less predictable, but less reliable to its, not just to adversaries, but to its allies, and if the United States is going to step away from its own multilateral organizations that it created, right, with its own values and standards after World War II, if the United States is no longer committed to free trade agreements, no longer committed to collective security arrangements, And if you cut a deal with the U.S., but Trump says, well, that deal doesn't work for me anymore, so I'm ripping it up. Well, China is saying we have the same leadership in place for generations. We have the same Communist Party in place for generations. And so you know that if we stand up for something, we're going to keep standing up for that thing. And so a whole bunch of countries that would rather do business with the United States if it was an equivalent offer are now starting to say we need to hedge more with other countries. And the biggest country that one can hedge with is China. Now, we don't want a China-led world, but we know we need to do more. And is that why Modi went to China for the first time in 8 years? Absolutely. And definitely Trump is a piece of that. He's not the only reason, but he's a piece of that. And that's why so many countries from the global south, so many countries from around Asia are spending a lot more time in China these days. Part of it is China's own success in investing at global scale in new technology and supply chain for that. Some of that is comparative stability of the Chinese political system, but a lot of it is also the lack of ability to count on, to rely on the United States.
Yeah, they've got their PR program down. You know, she usually does very succinct, matter of fact speeches at these international conferences. And in this one, he was very long-winded and was talking about, he had this, walk in the park with President Obama, and they were walking and noticing the trees and sort of going on and on. And at the end, it was sort of a Rodney Dangerfield gotcha at the end where he said, and now Obama's giving speeches and President Trump's the president, i.e.,
And I'm still here. Xi Jinping, hello. Exactly. Yeah.
Which is when I say their PR is down, it's like the weakness and how fickle democracy can be.
Well, and this is the funny thing, right, is that the United States historically has been a country you can rely on more, because even though there are different presidents every 4 years and sometimes more frequently, the U.S. supports rule of law. The U.S. has all these institutions that it has created, but it also binds itself to those agreements. And it accepts, through binding itself, a reduction of independence long-term, because the United States believes that it and other countries benefit more from that reliability, from that stability. And that's been what's behind the United States supporting, anchoring the world's most powerful collective security agreement in the world, the world's most powerful alliance, NATO. That's been what's behind the world's most powerful set of 3 integrated economies, the US, Mexico, and Canada, first with NAFTA and then with the USMCA, which was Trump's own deal. And now he says, second time around, well, I'm not going to keep up with that deal anymore. You're going to have to give me a better deal. So, I mean, there are all of these instances where the United States has said, you know what? It's the law of the jungle now, baby. We're the most powerful country out there, and you're going to have to do what we want. And Xi Jinping specifically said, we reject the law of the jungle. We want to follow rule of law. We want to follow a rules-based global order, which is that's the American line.
That's our thing, man.
I mean, it's one thing for them to rip off our intellectual property. You can't rip off our global order. Come on, that's too much.
Two things on law of the jungle: Department of War versus Department of Defense, which is in the news today.
I think that's a big one. I'll be honest. I think it really has to do with winning. We should have won every war. We could have won every war, but we really chose to be very politically correct or wokey.
And more seriously, we talked about this, and I believe this is ongoing, but for the longest time, if Israel bombed Iran, that was World War III, or at least war in the Middle East at bare minimum. For 20, 30, 40 years, everyone, oh my God, no, it can't be all-out war between Israel and Iran. Oh my God, oh my God. And not only did Israel bomb Iran, we bombed Iran, and it was a big zero. There was nothing happened, and you're sitting there saying, "Hold on a second. This was the big boogeyman in the Middle East for a long, long time. Everyone worried about World War III. This is the touchstone. This is the touchstone. Nothing happened. So let's go into the Ministry of War versus Ministry of Defense. The mindset there, law of the jungle, and bombing Iran."
Well, let's go back to Ministry of Department of whatever war. You can ask me about that in a second. But Iran, let's remember, this isn't Trump's first rodeo in Iran. At the end of Trump's first administration, after considerable provocation from the Iranians against U.S. bases in the region, in Iraq, and most notably, as well as against America's allies, drone attacks against Saudi Arabia's most important refining facility, Abqaiq. The Iranians were doing all sorts of things against the U.S. and its allies. And Trump said, okay, no more, and ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian armed forces. And how did Iran respond? They did nothing. Nothing. He called their bluff, and they did not have a fist in their glove. So this time around, on the back of Israel showing Iran that their axis of resistance is no such thing, and blowing up Hezbollah leadership, and taking on Yemen, where they just got rid of the prime minister and some of the cabinet. And of course, in Syria, this wasn't Israel, but in Syria, the Syrian people themselves were able to overthrow Bashar Assad, a core ally of the Iranians. So Israel then strikes Iran directly, and the United States wants a piece of that. And, this isn't about ground troops. This isn't about regime change, but this is about the United States saying, we're not going to let you get close to a nuclear weapon. And by all intents and purposes, it looks like the Iranians have been delayed in that capability by 2 to 3 years. And the U.S. and Israel clearly have impunity in their ability to continue to engage in strikes if they see the Iranians continue to develop and get close. So there, I don't see much backlash. America's allies in the region, not just Israel, but Gulf allies, were privately quite comfortable with the United States taking that military action. And I mean, the Europeans, who have been quite loud in opposing U.S. support for Israel's war in Gaza, and are taking actions themselves, were quite supportive of U.S. actions in Iran. And so again, there, I'm not surprised. Of course, Iran, yes, is providing lots of drones for Russia. But at the end of the day, Russia didn't do anything to defend Iran, to help the Iranians, while the Israelis and the Americans were blowing it up. So, I mean, the biggest question about Iran is, how much stability does this regime have? How much capacity does this 80-plus-year-old supreme leader and the Revolutionary Guards Corps, can they continue with a wildly deteriorating economy and no sort of ability to defend themselves to speak of? How much is pure repression on the ground going to allow them to keep on keeping on? Or is a Bashar Assad future something that they're going to experience as well?
Right. And you mentioned it, but it deserves amplifying that the three H's, the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah, have been seriously weakened.
Yes.
And they were the sort of thugs that Iran would send out in retaliation for these things, and were conspicuous by their silence after the bombing.
Yeah, they were conspicuous in their silence. We've seen a couple of, sort of Houthi drone attacks on Israel, one that just hit, didn't cause much damage, a small Israeli airport. But on balance, nothing to speak of. And, the Israelis, they're losing a lot of international support. Young people in the United States increasingly are more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. That's very new. European governments are under a lot of pressure to stop aligning with Israel. That's quite new. But Israel is not in any way being, sort of countered in terms of its military and national security policies in the region. And Netanyahu, the prime minister, is under less pressure today, domestically, politically, than he was 6 months ago, a year ago, 18 months ago. And that's the reality of law of the jungle applying not just to the United States and its foreign policy, but law of the jungle applying to Israel's foreign policy across the Middle East.
Who likes going to the doctor? Not me. And unless you're into some bizarre types of medical fetishism, maybe not you either. Now, whether it's a checkup or a weird mole that looks like Elvis or anything else you've been avoiding, ZocDoc makes booking a doctor stupidly easy. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality, in-network doctors, read real reviews, and book instantly. No endless waits. They've got 100,000 plus doctors across every specialty: mental health, dental health, primary care, dermatology, you name it. You can filter by insurance, location, ratings, and most people get in within 24 to 72 hours. There's even same-day availability. I've used it and it works way better than diagnosing yourself through Google. So go to ZocDoc.com/Shane and find and book a top-rated doctor today, instantly. That's ZocDoc.com/Shane. That's ZocDoc.com/Shane. Hello, Bango, and welcome to our BetMGM Lightning Round. And don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code Shane and get up to $1,500 first bet offer today. All right, brings us to the lightning round. How many G20 countries openly hedge between the U.S. and China by this time next year?
Oh, I mean, almost all of them. Most of them are doing it now. I'd say, 16, 17, 18.
Wow.
I mean, even Canada's hedging to a degree, right? I mean, they, all their trade and tourism is the United States, but they're hedging much more now than they were 6 months ago. Or that's the point, is that everyone kind of has to do it openly. They don't do it openly when they're meeting with Trump or meeting with Xi. They do it openly in every other circumstance.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the odds that China's revisionist take on World War II, downplaying the U.S. role, becomes part of a broader propaganda campaign this year?
Not so much. I don't think that was a taking advantage of the 80th opportunity. I think that otherwise this is all pretty consistent where the Chinese have been going for a long time now.
All right, point spread. Who's favored now? Europe rearming the Ukraine or Russia staying in power in the Ukraine?
Oh, Russia staying in power. Yeah, unfortunately. That is, it's hard to imagine the Russians. They're going to take more territory and they're not going to lose what they have.
Leading to next question. What's the bigger long shot, let's say? Trump-Putin peace deal that actually holds, or NATO expansion to the Ukraine?
Ooh, the bigger long shot. NATO expansion to Ukraine is the bigger long shot. These are both very unlikely, but I could see harder security guarantees really coming together in a ceasefire, but not in a full peace agreement. I could see that happening.
All right, underdog special. The biggest surprise player in the next 6 months. India, Turkey, the Saudis, anyone. Just who do you think is going to be the big international player?
It's got to be the Saudis. I mean, and the Gulf in general. I mean, if you were going to create Davos from scratch right now, it wouldn't be in Switzerland. It would be in the Gulf. I mean, these are countries that are transforming their economies and their political systems faster than any other countries in the world. Saudi Arabia is a G20 economy, and Mohammed bin Salman, for all of his warts, is incredibly popular among his own younger population, which is the vast majority of Saudi Arabia.
In Ukraine, in Yemen, Lebanon, Israel, we've seen, drones? India, Pakistan, see, you're already there, drones. These sort of rise of drones, asymmetrical war, this sort of new, cheap-ish, lowbrow, but very effective. We saw it actually with the Ukrainians in an incredibly well-organized operation where they shipped them all over the Russian, countryside, and then they took out their bombers, their $100 million bombers with a $10,000 drone.
The scale of the operation is remarkable, with the strikes hitting at least 4 airfields from western Russia across to Moscow and reaching the country's far east, thousands of miles from Ukraine.
What does the rise of the drones, that could be our next movie, the rise of the drones, what are the ramifications for international stability and or politics?
Well, I mean, just in the last 48 hours, you've seen the Russians be able to hit Ukrainian targets, government buildings in the center of Kiev, because they can overwhelm Ukrainian air defenses with drones.
Ukraine says more than 800 drones were launched, as well as 4 ballistic missiles and 9 cruise missiles. The early morning barrage hit several residential buildings in Kyiv, wounding more than a dozen people.
We've seen the Ukrainians attacking deeper into Russia, $300 drones taking out $100+ million jet fighters. But we're also seeing Ukrainian drones that they're producing. These aren't coming from the US or from NATO. They're producing them. That are able to attack and destroy Russia's refining capabilities. Now, on the one hand, it's great to see Ukraine have the ability to defend itself to a greater degree and to hit back against untrammeled illegal aggression and war crimes, right? So most civilized people are rooting for the Ukrainians here. On the other hand, what would happen in this kind of a war if the Ukrainians showed that they could actually hit the Kremlin, if they started taking out, sort of military leaders, oligarchs, their kids, maybe even threaten Putin himself? I mean, you are starting, that escalation starts to make this war getting beyond the trench warfare with the grinding depths of all of these people. Suddenly this could be something that becomes a real worry for countries outside of Russia and Ukraine. And so, I worry about what happens when we are developing a whole bunch of smaller countries with really advanced military capabilities, non-state actors with really advanced military capabilities, terrorist actors with increasingly advanced military capabilities. The White House has a special task force they put together on dealing with drones in the past couple months. They're worried about how do you defend? I mean, Trump was just at the US Open. How do you defend a big stadium filled to the rim with people? How do you defend it against a swarm of drone strikes? This is an increasingly open and real question that I fear we're going to learn the answer to real time. So, I think that this stuff is destabilizing broadly, not just for the people that are, sort of fighting and dying in these wars.
And speaking about our friends, the Houthis, who just attacked Israel with a bunch of drones, there was a lot of news, and I come to you to sort of gauge how true these things are, that they sort of went down and clipped some internet or information wires that were going underneath the...
Was it the Red Sea? I think it was the Red Sea, actually.
Red Sea.
Yeah.
And now, of course, there's blackouts and information isn't hitting. And then I heard, this has got the rumor mill going because, my sources saying that the Yemenis don't have anywhere near this technological capability. Other people saying it didn't result in any blackouts. But there's obviously a press offensive going on. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I also recognize that critical infrastructure is vulnerable and that deterrence is getting harder to effect. I mean, there was just a jamming attack against Ursula von der Leyen's official plane while she was in it, while it was flying, and they had to land. If that wasn't the Russians, it was almost certainly that the Russians were engaged with and talking to. I mean, that's not the kind of thing that, a criminal, sort of consortium is doing by themselves. There's no ransomware around it. The Chinese are deep inside American critical infrastructure, and they're getting information, but they're also preparing for what happens if there's untrammeled escalation between the two countries. They have the ability to shut American infrastructure down. So, these are, the fact that we're increasingly online systems are vulnerable to digital attacks. This is, it's not, you don't have to have people on the ground engaged in physical espionage. Those attacks can come from anywhere. And, look, I was worried. I remember when Mosul fell and was taken over by ISIS in Iraq, and there were hundreds of millions of dollars in the banks in hard currencies and gold and the rest that suddenly were in the hands of terrorist organizations. I was very concerned. What happens if they use that to like start paying for coders that are good at cyber, at malware? Like, suddenly you're going to have ISIS becoming a cyber actor. Now,
ISIS goes online.
That didn't happen. But, that those risks are becoming greater, especially when you don't need great coders. They can do vibe coding. Then suddenly all you really need is the intention. I mean, I could do it. You could do it. You don't need an engineering degree. I worry about bad actors becoming radicalized with not so much money, but the ability to cause an awful lot of damage that, falls short of what we would call physical terrorist activity, but could have massive economic implications and frankly, human implications. I mean, I remember when the Russians shut down, Ukraine's digital capabilities that included hospitals and respirators and the rest. And, people died because they didn't have power. That was a cyber attack. These things are real.
They shut down the gas to Eastern Europe, including a lot of Germany, in the middle of winter.
Yeah, these things all have physical manifestations, and yet we don't really know how to respond. We know that if tanks go across the border into the Baltics or into Poland, we understand that either you respond directly and the U.S. has to support, or it's the end of NATO. We know that. But we have a much harder time dealing in this gray area, which shouldn't be so gray, and the Russians are taking advantage of that.
Now, these are all sort of, individual instances or sort of micro examples. On the macro, and I'm going to quote, I believe you, but if not, I'm old, but somebody in your organization, to quote, "The Committee to Save the World has gone AWOL." So we have all of these things happening, all of these problems, all of these, situations that are cropping up. And the world's policeman hitherto has been the USA, and now that the sort of Committee to Save the World has gone AWOL. What do you think that means?
Well, that was actually our chief strategist, Rob Kahn, that wrote that a few weeks ago. I remember that piece. But I mean, I certainly subscribe to it. And what I call a G0 world, not a G7, not a G20, but a world that is absent global leadership, where the United States is not committed to playing the role it has heretofore in free trade, in collective security, in upholding rule of law, in being a backstop in core multilateral institutions and agreements. In that sort of a world, no one else is capable of filling that gap. We talked a bit about China, and China sees opportunities for themselves, absolutely, but not to replace the U.S. as a global leader. Europe understands that they have to play a leadership role on Russia, Ukraine, and they're stepping up. They're doing a lot more. Now, will it be enough? Will they continue in that form in 3 and 5 years' time after the next round of elections in countries like France and Germany and the UK, which could be very Eurosceptic? That's certainly the trend right now. Maybe, but even if they do, they're not filling the leadership gap on Asia or on the Middle East or anywhere else. So, yeah, this implies much more geopolitical instability and conflict. And also, we haven't spoken yet about tariffs. The most consequential thing that Trump has done on the global stage in the last year has been increase tariffs to levels we have not seen since Smoot-Hawley 100 years ago. And those
you keep ruining my question. You keep ruining my question. I was going to surprise you with who the hell are Smoot-Hawley and why does it matter in 2025?
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives passed the the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or lowered tariffs.
Because it's the next obvious place to go when you say, where's the leadership? Globalization is the thing that the United States was principally leading. And that meant goods and services and people and ideas and capital moving faster and faster across global borders. And that is facilitated by the most powerful country in the world with the reserve currency and the systemically important financial institutions upholding a free market system. And that is something that the United States has principally turned against and saying, no, we're actually going to use tariffs as a primary tool for diplomatic ends, for economic ends, and for national security ends. And we're going to do it with every other country around the world. Friend, foe, doesn't matter. Countries that we have deficits with or surpluses with, doesn't matter. And that is going to be sticky, because when you're making hundreds of billions of dollars off of tariffs, even if Americans are primarily paying it, a Democratic administration isn't going to say, oh, I don't want that money anymore, because it's going to make your deficit look wider. So they're going to want that revenue. Other countries are going to say, oh, that's how you're playing? Okay, well, we need to make sure that we're protecting our industries too. So it's a beggar thy neighbor approach that becomes much more expensive for everyone. It reduces growth for everyone. It is the absence of U.S. leadership, but the inability and unwillingness of other countries to come in and play that role. And so globalization will start to fragment. That is where we're headed. And that's what this new non-free trade role, and Americans have not been super supportive of free trade for a long time. I mean, I would say from a geopolitical consequence perspective, it really started with Obama, with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was the signature international policy of his administration, that he was incapable and unwilling to get over the goal line. And Hillary Clinton, running for president to succeed him, did not support it, even though privately she had no problem with it because the public didn't support free trade. And Trump said he was going to get rid of it. And when he became president, he spiked it. And that was that. And that is only that anti-free trade sentiment in the United States has only grown for the Democrats and the Republicans. It's almost as hard to find a free trade supporter in Washington as it is to find someone who wants to bring deficits down. I mean, truly. Yeah. And I mean, both of these things are long-term bad for U.S. growth.
Now, we've got tariffs. A lot of the tariffs, the bargaining chips have been, ironically, chips. So let's talk a little bit about chips, rare earth minerals, China. We're ahead in the chip game, but not for long. Our strategic chip initiative, Intel, all of this business. We're like, what part do chips play in this sort of international game of chess?
There are two big new constellations of technologies that are going to really matter geopolitically. One is artificial intelligence and the things that are around it, growing up around it. The second is post-carbon energy and the things that are growing up around it. These are massive transitions going to drive incredible efficiencies of scale, productivity, disruptions. They will affect every sector of the global economy. Mm-hmm. The United States has the lead in AI for now. It is not clear for how long. It is hotly contested among top experts in the field. The Chinese have a massive lead in post-carbon energy, and not only are the Americans not close, but they're not even trying. So there are lots of ways that the United States has a stronger economy than China does. But when you think about future technologies that will allow for leapfrogging of the existing way of doing business and developing power, suddenly you're starting to make much bigger bets on the Chinese than you ever had before. And I think that's a huge mistake for the United States. I have no problem, by the way. The U.S. right now is clearly the world's strongest petrostate. It produces more oil and gas than any other country in the world. It exports a lot too. I have no problem with that. The world is going to need oil and gas for a long time. You want to have data centers? Those data centers are going to be powered, a lot of them, by fossil fuels, not by renewable energy, not yet, not at scale. So you need oil and gas. But China is not only producing a lot of coal and importing a lot of oil and gas, but they are becoming the world leaders in electric vehicles, and batteries and solar power and wind power and nuclear power and all the supply chain and refining and resource exploitation to support that. And the United States, so China is becoming not just does it have fossil fuels through coal, but China is becoming the world's first true electro state, while the United States is not developing more electricity.
Right.
Which is insane. It's insane. And that is it is a regulatory problem. It is a industry capture problem. It is an anti-science problem, and it is a penny wise, pound foolish, the United States investing in the short term and not the long term. And it's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt us a lot.
And it shows the power of the oil lobby. California out here, there was a big thing where you could get free solar. And in fact, you could make money because you were providing energy to the grid and makes the grid stronger. And then the sort of powers that be said, yeah, well, if you want to do this, then you have to pay your share of the grid, which you owe us $100 billion backdated to 1917. So we'll take our $1 trillion now.
It's just insanity. It really is. I mean, look, Texas is actually the leader in the United States of renewable energy production. Texas.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia is saying that they need to move to renewables for a majority of their internal energy consumption as fast as possible. I mean, when Texas and Saudi Arabia are doing it, do not tell me that the future is oil, gas, and coal. Do not tell me that. So, and look, the fact is that oil, gas, and coal are not getting cheaper. We're not getting technology scaling these old energy sources. Solar, the prices are coming down exponentially. We have to invest in the future. It's not just about climate change.
Storage is getting more efficient and cheaper.
And batteries are getting more efficient. I mean, I'm sick of the idea that we can't have the best electric cars in the world. Why can't we? I mean, Chinese electric vehicles are the best in the world. They're cheaper. They're better produced. They have longer ability to run on batteries. They've got infrastructure that supports them. In the United States, we have to have worse, more expensive electric vehicles. That's unacceptable. American consumers should have the best of everything.
The last two questions is a perfect dovetail to that, which is, okay, we're seemingly crazy in not investing in technology to get off fossil fuels, to at least change, to adapt, to get onto the future of energy. Our energy consumption is just going through the roof, but we need to find different ways to satisfy that desire. That leads to the environment. It seems like the environment, which for the longest time when I got out of college, it was the biggest question on everybody's lips. It seems to have fallen by the wayside. The Earth's getting hotter, record temperatures every year. Weather is becoming unpredictable, massive forest fires, lots of storms and tornadoes and the works. Anyway, we all know what's happening, but the will to change that seems to have gone. Why has the environment been forgotten? We all live in it.
I don't accept that. I mean, you and I are older, Shane. Younger people care a lot about the environment. The global South cares a lot about the environment. That's where a majority of the people actually live. They're being affected to a much greater degree. I do think that some of the hype of apocalypse, that the world was going to move towards 4, 5, even 6 degrees centigrade of warming, we now recognize that's not going to happen. The worst case scenarios appear to be 3 degrees centigrade, which is awful and horrible and massive amounts of displacement and disruption of people around the world, not to mention the fact that a whole bunch of animals and life on the planet won't be here anymore. But it is not the 4, 5, 6 degrees that you've seen a lot of people talk about.
The apocalypse,
Yeah. And a big part of that, part of it's the science just learning more and getting more advanced so we can narrow what we think, the landing point is. But part of it is because even if the United States doesn't care about renewables, the rest of the world is moving in that direction because they want the cheapest possible energy at scale. And so if that cheapest energy is going to come from renewables, that's what they're going to do. So I do think, I don't know if it's within 20 years or if it's 40 years, but I do think that you and I have a chance, and our kids definitely will see, assuming we don't blow ourselves up before then, we will be living in a planet that has abundant, decentralized, post-carbon energy. And it's going to be a lot cheaper And that's an incredible future. So, I mean, we have to get from here to there, and there's a lot of damage, but we can see that humanity is actually engineering its way out of this problem.
I have two things. One, give me your quick take on the Ukraine next 6 months. What's happening today, and what do you see happening in the next 6 months, or at least to year's end, so you don't have to crystal ball it too much?
Yeah.
And then what are the three biggest things going to be at the UN General Assembly?
So Ukraine, next 6 months, there is no willingness of Putin to sit down with Zelensky at this point. The Ukrainians are still fighting as well as they can, but they don't have the same manpower that the Russians do, and that gap is likely to grow. It is hard for the Russians to take land, but they are taking land, albeit slowly. So they believe that they're going to be in a better position to dictate terms over time the longer they fight. And meanwhile, Trump has not been credible despite all of these repeated deadlines he gives Putin, that would make Putin feel like there are really consequences for him for continuing to ignore Trump's demands for a ceasefire and direct negotiations between the two combatants. So I expect that this war is going to keep going. I think, sadly, the Ukrainians are going to be in a more challenging position, but the Europeans are stepping up, and the Americans are likely to continue to provide support, even if it's less amount of support for that reason. Now, for UN, which is going to occupy me completely in a couple weeks' time here in New York, one thing that's not going to make a lot of news is the Palestinians, because they're not going to be in New York. They're not getting visas. But the Gaza issue will be very important. We have the UAE, which quite surprisingly and dramatically said that if Israel goes ahead with an annexation in the West Bank, that the UAE will withdraw from the Abraham Accords, which was the signature achievement of Trump's first administration, a very big deal. So, I mean, this really should be meant to make the Israelis stand up and pay attention. And it does come as a consequence. In the same way that Putin doesn't feel there are any consequences, perhaps Israel starts to feel that there are some consequences for acting with impunity on the ground in Gaza and in the West Bank. So that's going to be a big issue. And we'll see how all of the Middle Eastern leaders, how Israel, how the United States respond around that. How the Chinese continue, how are they able to take more advantage as being a country that says that they want a global order with rules, as opposed to a United States which is clearly not committed with this administration to the United Nations and to the Charter. That tension, I think, is going to be significant. And then there's a big question about Europe. I mean, the Europeans are the principal allies of the U.S. that are in trouble when the Americans go unilateralist. And, the big change, Shane, in the last 30 years has not been the U.S. in decline. The big change has been America's allies have been in decline. They've been weakening. The Europeans have not gotten more competitive. They're spending on social contract that they're not growing to support. They don't have the technology companies. Their regulations are much more difficult to navigate. And unlike the United States and unlike China, they don't have governance at scale. They don't have a state. They have an EU that requires 27 countries to agree on things. And they're not moving towards a state either. They're not moving towards a banking union or a defense union. So how the Europeans manage that at a time where just today, the French have lost yet another government. They're going to have their fifth in how many months? Unprecedented stuff. We haven't seen this in generations. The Brits, Labour Party is doing very poorly right now. The Reform Party is performing better. And in Germany, AfD is continuing to perform. So it is the populace, it is the Eurosceptics that are winning. And increasingly, many Europeans look like they're one electoral cycle behind the United States. So, I mean, they may be up there banging the chairs to say they want more UN, but it's the Americans right now that seem to have the momentum for what the people say they want. And that is a fundamental area of conflict, of tension and conflict that we need to pay a lot of attention to.
All right. Final thoughts. Number one hope, number one fear going forward into the new year.
Number one hope is that the ability of other countries around the world not to replace the United States, but to provide stability at the margins on things that matter to them over time doesn't just help us avoid World War III, but actually creates something that the Americans will want to bet more on, will help facilitate the United States being more willing to accept a greater piece of that participation in leadership. That would be my greatest hope. My greatest fear is that U.S. political institutions continue to erode. We've spoken of many wars. We've talked about Israel, Gaza, Russia, Ukraine. We haven't talked much about the war between the Americans and the Americans, and it's not a violent war, but it is a political one, and it's not getting any better. I worry about the impact of that over time. It doesn't feel sustainable.
Hear, hear. And on that light note, Ian Bremmer, friend of the show, thanks again. Let's catch up after UNGA and see if anything pops up there. And again, appreciate it.
Sounds good, Shane. Be good.
Have a good day. Hi, it's Shane Smith. I wanted to let you know about my new Substack. I'm shanesmith.substack.com. Now, I'm going to be posting a lot of new content there, from extended versions of this show to behind-the-scenes stories from my adventures all over the world with Vice. Now, the best part, it's free if you sign up now. So go to shanesmith.substack.com and enter your email. That's it, shanesmith.substack.com. Or click the link below, which rhymes with Bazango.